I'm starting to feel like we don't need to go to fear yet, but we certainly need to up the level of urgency. Like when we see this level of innovation and testing these tools and knowing how good they are and talking to the AI researchers behind these things and knowing what they're working on that's coming next, I just really think creative professionals and agencies in particular, you have to have a sense of urgency to understand this stuff. Welcome to the Marketing AI Show, the podcast that helps your business grow smarter by making artificial intelligence approachable and actionable. You'll hear from top authors, entrepreneurs, researchers, and executives as they share case studies, strategies, and technologies that have the power to transform your business and your career. My name is Paul Raitzer. I'm the founder of Marketing AI Institute, and I'm your host. Welcome to episode 21 of the Marketing AI Show. I'm your host, Paul Raitzer, along with my co-host, Mike Kaput, who is the Chief Content Officer at Marketing AI Institute and co-author of our book, Marketing Artificial Intelligence, AI Marketing and the Future of Business. Available now. What's up, Mike?
How's it going?
Good. We're both battling, I think, coughs and colds. And so we'll try and do this for everyone without having coughing fits as we're going.
Yeah, we'll use some AI to edit those out, hopefully.
Yeah, I think we've used a script for our
Yeah.
AI. I know they can remove filler words. Maybe they can remove like coughing fits. And it might be a drop down option in Descript. If not, it's a product idea for them.
Yes.
All right. So we've got, like our last weekly, we've got 3 cool topics. It's been a very busy week in AI. But before we get started on that, I want to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, AI Advertising. AI advertising makes the Marketing AI Show possible, for one. And second, it is a campaign performance platform that closes the loop, eliminates guesswork, and connects advertising investments to sales revenue. They leverage zero first and third-party data to identify customer segments and predict winning creative. Their automated design tools easily scale multiple versions for all ad formats and channels, while the sophisticated measurement capabilities provide user-level analytics that continually drive creative optimization and performance. The advertising is shifting the paradigm, leveraging AI to fuse marketer and machine. Learn more at aiadvertising.com. And we do have a couple of AI in action webinars with Kevin and the team at AI Advertising. So if you're interested in learning more about them, you can also go on Marketing AI Institute and check out the resource section. And there's these AI in action, like educational demos. And they're a great partner and doing some cool stuff there. So let's go, Mike. What is topic number 1 today?
All right. We've got a pretty crazy schedule. Like you noted, I feel like the weekly format here works really well because people are going to be so shocked at how many things can happen in the last 7 days in artificial intelligence.
How about the last 24 hours? I feel like I messaged you like 4 different times on Zoom. It's like, hey, here, I add this to the schedule.
All right. So first up, Gartner, the analyst firm, has identified 7 technology disruptions that are going to impact sales in the next 5 years. So the entire sales profession, they are saying that sales leaders need to recognize, prioritize, and respond to these 7 disruptions over the next 5 years, or risk becoming obsolete or falling behind the competition. And the great thing about all 7 of these is that they are all based around AI. So I'm going to quickly run through the 7 and just list those off, but I do want to get kind of into a couple of the stats they drop on here in this article because some of these are crazy and really, really cool. So the 7 technologies are generative AI. So things like DALL-E 2, Jasper, Stable Diffusion. We'll be talking a lot about tools like that in a minute here. Something they call digital twin of the customer. So actually simulating elements of your customer's behavior and personality in order to better understand them. Augmented reality / virtual reality. Machine customers, which was actually a really interesting one to me. So actually machines that will go do buying for you as a customer, as a consumer. Digital humans, which would be avatars that are simulated by artificial intelligence to interact with customers. Emotion AI, which is using AI to understand what emotions are actually impacting people, how they're feeling. And then multimodality, which was basically saying there's going to be multiple modes for sellers to log activities, and AI is going to layer over all that data to essentially assist and augment your sales operations. And so before we dive into these, there are a couple of really wild stats that they called out. So in the case of generative AI, which can produce everything from images, video, movies, what have you, and we've talked about it in the past. We're going to talk a lot about it today. Gartner predicts that by 2025, which is 3 years from now, 30% of outbound messages from large organizations will be synthetically generated. So almost a third of all messaging, all interactions, they believe will be AI powered in some way. Another crazy stat to me is that we're actually going to see by 2024, in their estimation, AI identification of emotions will influence roughly half of the online ads that buyers see. So you'll actually start seeing dynamic advertising and messaging based on the emotions that you respond to most. And also, I thought it was really interesting by 2025, 70% of all B2B seller buyer interactions are going to be recorded so that AI, machine learning, and NLP, natural language processing, can be layered over them to augment and impact sales operations. I know you had sent me a couple of those. What are your thoughts on that? Those to me are very, very realistic, but also just a shocking display of how far we've come, how fast.
Yeah, I read this post. I was doing a keynote actually at Marketing Profs B2B Forum last week, and I read this post the evening before I went on, and I actually had an AI and sales slide in the presentation. I was like, I feel like I need to go update the deck. I did not do it, but I actually infused a little bit of this narrative into the keynote the next morning. Um, and I also put it on LinkedIn that next day and just sort of shared some of these stats. And I thought it was interesting. There was a lot of engagement with that post. There was some condescending or like disagreeing on the level of whether these numbers would be achieved, being called BS in one case. Um, I don't disagree that these numbers may be way off. I mean, generally speaking, that happens all the time when we're trying to predict the future. Because if we actually knew these numbers, then we wouldn't probably be working for a living. We would just be,
Right.
making bets on other stuff. But I think it's representative of some really important trends, and the key is they're going to be big. So whether the outbound messaging is 15% or 60%, it's going to be significant. In other words, there are way too many marketers and brands not even paying attention yet, don't even know what generative AI is. There's a good chance if you're listening to this, you don't know what the term generative AI actually means. And what they're saying is it's going to be a very significant part of your life within the next 2 to 3 years. And so when I look at stuff like this, I don't necessarily put a ton of weight on are they going to be accurate in the total amount or value. What I look at is think, damn, I hadn't even thought about digital twins. Like, so I look at this trend and think, you and I talk about this stuff all the time. We write about it. I mean, we had a whole chapter on sales in our book. We didn't talk about digital twins in that chapter. I hadn't even been on my radar.
Hmm.
And so that was one of the ones where I stopped and thought, man, like this is really interesting stuff. And again, I didn't get caught up in the numbers, but the digital twin thing alone is so intriguing. And it made me want to go research the vendors that are doing this, like who's building these digital twins, because the concept is so smart. Like if you can take your customer profile data, everything they've ever done before, we know we can build lookalike audiences for ad targeting, but what if we can actually generate a synthetic version of that customer and then run our ads and social shares and emails against that database?
Hmm.
So rather than having to send A/B tests and things like that, you just basically replicate your database and you create computer models of the customer, and then you see how they interact with things. Like it's so smart. And that they're saying it's big, going to be big enough by 2030, which tells me, like they said, it's 9 billion in 2022 up to 150 billion by 2030. That means somebody's doing this right now. Like
Hmm.
who's doing the digital twin stuff? Because I want to know. I want to read those case studies. I want to evaluate that tech. So That was one of the things that jumped out to me. The other is emotion AI, I find intriguing. So the stat you
Mhm.
mentioned was AI identification of emotions influence roughly half of online ads. Right? I've talked to 2 vendors in the last 7 days doing emotion AI.
Mhm.
And it's like, either whether it's in research or predicting ad performance. And basic premise is they can use computer vision in one of the cases to read your emotions. And while you may answer a survey in one way, your face may tell a different story. And so they're trying to use these computer models to train on people's emotions. And then the computer can actually, predict what your emotion or reaction is to something. So I think multimodality is another one. Like Google talks about that all the time.
Yeah.
So these themes, these 7 trends, I think don't get caught up in the numbers. Focus on the fact that these are really big things. And again, like we know some major software companies that aren't doing this stuff. And so the other takeaway I had was there's not enough urgency from marketers to figure this stuff out, and not enough urgency from a lot of the vendors we talk about to be working on this stuff. Like if you're a
Mhm.
CRM platform, I don't want to call any out, but like if you're a CRM platform and you're not like thinking about this in your product roadmap, there's some problems ahead. Like this stuff's real tech that needs to be infused into the core tech solutions that we use as marketers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's a really good point about the stats themselves. It's like you want to focus on the size and the directionality of the trend, right? And there's no question these are huge trends that are accelerating. So, yeah, whether the number ends up being right or not, and honestly, I mean, looking at things like a digital twin, you're right. I don't see many marketers and salespeople at all taking it seriously. And I think that's the takeaway is like, who cares about what the numbers end up being? This is here. It's now. It is happening.
Yeah.
And I think the next topic here shows how quickly this stuff can happen and how fast the landscape can change. So we mentioned the term generative AI, this stuff like Dolly 2, Stability AI, Jasper is a generative AI tool we have mentioned. And what these tools do is create. They create writing, they create text, they create art, they create video. We've seen some really cool high profile examples with Meta's Make a Video tool, OpenAI's various GPT-3 and Dolly 2 platforms. However, what we saw this past week is a massive amount of funding funnel into a couple key companies in this space. So the two that really jumped out to us were Stability AI, which is the maker of Stable Diffusion, which is the open source generative AI platform that has been very closely compared to DALL-E 2 and is being used, I bet, in a lot of these other tools that we've discussed. They just raised $101 million in funding from some of the top venture capital firms in the world to turn this product, this platform, into open source generative AI for anyone who wants to use it. Universities, individual consumers, other companies, which I'd want to circle back to in a minute, given our talk about people needing to move fast. People are already building things using Stability AI's platforms, and the funding puts them at over $1 billion in valuation. And not only that, it is led by a couple massive VC firms, one of which Lightspeed Ventures, who has one of the biggest tech VC firms, I believe, in the world, um, published a post as well about it saying, look, this is actually one of the most unique open source AI products we've seen. The user growth is wild and just like the it's an exponential upward trend. There's a lot of success here, but I thought it was also really interesting that they also said we would be remiss in not acknowledging that Stable Diffusion has also generated controversy around some of these generative AI tools. There's a lot of controversy and talk about who owns what, who owns which copyrights to which images. And Lightspeed Ventures basically said, we're very, very aware of the impact we're having here. However, the market is moving so fast. Essentially, the technology is moving so fast that
However, we don't care.
yeah, right,
It's
right.
basically what it says.
So we've got on one hand that happening, and then on the other hand, Jasper, a tool with which we're quite familiar and use somewhat, they just announced $125 million Series A round at a $1.5 billion valuation. And again,
Series A. Stress that it was a Series A.
yes,
First
that
first round, basically outside of the seed. So
yeah, unreal. And this is again an AI powered writing and art tool that we're using in marketing for various applications. It could be used for blog posts, emails, a lot of different marketing assets. This is a tool that has a direct application to marketing, and it just raised a monster round, and it comes from some of the top VC firms in the world. The money flowing into these two companies is jaw dropping to me.
yes, I have so many thoughts on this one. Um, so the language AI, the writing tools, is such a natural entry point for so many marketers because we all write. So I feel like, when I was at the Marketing Profs event last week, there was probably like 350 or 400 B2B marketers. And I would venture to say that the majority of them were probably not early adopters of AI. They're not racing out ahead and trying all these AI tools. And yet, when I gave my talk and I showed like language AI tools and I showed the image generation tools like Stability AI is enabling, what I've found is I think we're approaching or at a tipping point in the understanding and adoption of AI in marketing because tools like this, the generative AI tools, are accessible to everyone. So I can give a keynote about AI and I can show Dolly, and you can go get Dolly while you're in the talk and your 15 free credits. And by the end of that talk, you can have been creating images in Dolly. And you can go show your family at Thanksgiving dinner. It is like, let me show you this crazy thing it does. Language, same thing. You can go get Jasper right now and you can start playing around with it. You can play around with their image generation tech. The tech, this generative AI tech is so accessible that people actually can experience AI and understand it. 2-3 years ago, we couldn't do that. And I think that's what's causing this tipping point. And so, like, again, this is just like last Thursday, I was giving this
Mhm.
marketing props talk. And then all of a sudden, you fast forward like 3 days and we're getting 101 million in funding. I'm sending our investors and like people, and it's like, holy cow, like, look at this. Like, this is what we're talking about. And then, like, this morning I wake up and I'm like, oh, geez, Jasper announced 125 million yesterday. And I was just having a conversation with another language AI company yesterday about how competitive this space is and how hard it is to pick winners. I had somebody last week that was looking at language AI tools ask me like, which is the best one? And I was like, ask me again in 3 months, I'll probably give you a different answer. And someone literally said, like, is it Jasper? Is it Copy.ai? Is it Writer? Is it GoChart? Like, who's the winner? And I'm like, there's no winner yet. Like, it is an absolute arms race right now. It's who's can raise the most money, who can recruit the best AI researchers. Like, it's really hard to say who the winner is at this point. But I think we might have touched on it last week, but I mean, there's $1 trillion companies sitting here right now. Like,
Mhm.
someone is building $1 trillion generative AI company. It might be one of these two that we're talking about right now, but this space is on fire right now. And it is, as people who live in this space, it's really, really hard to keep up. The the one thing I want to kind of like, I kind of made a snide remark as we were going through about like their thing, and I want to I want to add some context to my snide remark. So I love the Lightspeed Ventures kind of editorial about why they did this investment,
Mhm.
but I want to read this for a second. So this is straight from what's the guy's name? I don't know. Gaurav Gupta, I think, is Lightspeed, one of the partners I assume one of the partners at Lightspeed.
Yes.
So it says our thesis for generative AI starts with the belief that storytelling, whether it be about a person, business, or idea, is fundamentally what makes us human. My radar went up at that. It's okay, it makes us human. But telling a good story is not easy. It requires content creation, whether it be text, images, video, audio, or a presentation. Today, the process of content creation remains manual and difficult. Very true, but also it's an art. So people who do this love that they do this and enjoy the manual process of creating. So I don't know that we're solving for writers and designers who actually like the fact that that's what they do. But I continue. So, quote, Generating a beautiful image representing a story not only requires imagination, but artistic skill, knowledge of tools like Adobe Photoshop, and years of work and training. Generative AI has the power to reduce much of this manual, quote unquote, manual work and make it more accessible to all. We believe generative AI has the power to fundamentally change almost every creative endeavor, whether it be entertainment, media, advertising, education, science, and art. Ultimately, Stability's vision is to bring similar capabilities to text, video, audio, and more. So, I put this on LinkedIn and somebody almost immediately was like, well, that's a pretty techie kind of view of things. Like that, let's just, yes, it's going to harm all these people and like devalue what they do, but all these other people who can't do what they do will now be able to do it. It's basically what that says. It's like, okay, so
Mhm.
the non-designers, non-writers, don't worry, like you're going to be able to be a writer and designer. And I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm not like presenting this as I think what they're doing is wrong. I don't at all. I just think it's a reality that people aren't ready for. And we talk about this over and over again that the designers and the writers, and you and I are both writers by trade, have no clue how advanced this stuff is and
Mhm.
where it's going in the next like 6 to 12 months. They are not ready for it. And I appreciate that Lightspeed and Stability are at least acknowledging this.
Yep.
But my general sense talking to a lot of these companies, a lot of these people is like, yeah, it kind of sucks, but here we go. Like we're going forward anyway. Like we're building the tech. We're able to build it. We're going to build it. And if we don't release it, they're going to release it. So we're just going to just move forward and let's figure it out as we go and pick up the pieces along the way. And so I just think it's really important that people understand this stuff's happening with or without you. You don't have to
Yep.
like it. We don't have to like it, but it's happening. And there is literally an arms race for this. And it's a funding arms race right now.
Yep.
But hundreds of millions, and especially at a series A, is a lot of money. Um, and I've talked to the people not at Stability, like we know the people at Jasper, pretty well. We follow them closely. We follow Copy.ai and Writer and Hyperwrite and all these GPT-3 powered techs. And man, this stuff's real. And then I mean, maybe we'll do more on this next week, but I was just sharing with you, like I was playing around with the Google AI test kitchen
Mhm.
where you can play around with Lambda, which is their large language model. So GPT-3 is a large language model that enables AI writing. Lambda does the same. And man, is that stuff good. Like it's wild. Like, I don't know. Again, having lived this space for 10 years now and researched it, and we've been writing about it and exploring it, I feel like more has happened in the last like 60 days than it happened in the previous 9 years, like in
I
terms
couldn't
of
agree
advancements of the
more.
space.
It's unreal, and it's hard to communicate to people just how fast that is moving
Yep.
and what that means. I mean, one thing that did strike me about so we had talked about Stability's funding and then Jasper getting funding, and there's actually a bit of overlap between the investors in each one pretty naturally.
Yeah.
One of the top firms leading Stabilities is also a follow-on for Jasper. But what also struck me is you do have companies like or venture firms like HubSpot's venture wing, HubSpot Ventures. The venture firms that are involved here are also involved with companies like Twitter, Shutterstock, Landing AI. I mean, that's probably pretty um, standard, I would say, in this space. But they also shout out some investors who I assume were kind of in the seed round for Jasper or have been
Yeah.
advisors, and people like David Cancel, who founded Drift, which is a huge conversational AI company in marketing and sales. There's Amjad Masad, who's actually a founder and CEO at a company called Replit, which is an online coding environment that I've used a little bit. And they just released an AI assisted coding feature. And then one of the other advisors is Ahmad Mustaq, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the founder and CEO of Stability AI. So these advancements and these investments are having an exponential effect as they are sharing knowledge. If you can do generative AI in one space, the people that crack the code there can also help someone who wants to crack the code on writing, on coding, on all of these creative and or language based or image based pursuits. I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah. And the final thing I'll say here is, you and I for years have debated on our tone when we talk about this stuff, and that we can't push fear. Like we've always made a very conscious effort not to use messaging that creates fear for people. That we wanted to provide real education and information, be realistic about where we were at, and try and present people with a very logical path forward to figure this stuff out. I'm starting to feel like we don't need to go to fear yet, but we certainly need to up the level of urgency.
Mm.
Like when we see this level of innovation and testing these tools and knowing how good they are and talking to the AI researchers behind these things and knowing what they're working on that's coming next, I just really think creative professionals and agencies in particular, you have to have a sense of urgency to understand this stuff. It truly is going to affect you very, very quickly. And
Yeah.
I really want people to go test something out and see it for yourself. Like, don't take our word for it, but go get Dolly, go test Stable Diffusion or Mid Journey on the image side. Go play around with, a language model through Jasper, Copy AI or Writer, Go Charlie, or keep, any list of these things. It's just really, really important that you see for yourself what's happening in the space.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings us, I think, to the third thing that jumped out to us this week is a Wired article that came out that is titled AI Shouldn't Compete with Workers, It Should Supercharge Them. Now, this article is a bit commentary and a bit reporting on some research that was done by a man named Eric Brynolfsson. And he is notable because he is an academic who has done research on the impact of automation on the economy for decades now. And he actually was the co-author of a book that you and I found really formative called The Second Machine Age, where he basically gave a version of what you just talked about, where he said, look, there's going to be some industries that might want to have some urgency around figuring out the impact of automation and artificial intelligence on employment. And I thought what was really, really cool and interesting about this article is that he has a quote in here that I wanted to kind of get your take on, but it really aligns with how we counsel people to think about this technology. So he says, quote, it's 100 times easier to look at something existing and think, okay, can we substitute a machine or a human there? The really hard thing is let's imagine something that never existed before. But ultimately, that second way is where most of the value comes from. When we start thinking about AI as an augmentation tool or a tool that's going to change your work, but in a possibly positive way, that's really where this kind of idea that we've talked about quite a bit, AI native, AI emergent, or AI or obsolete businesses starts to really become very important.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most approachable way to think about it too, where it is assistive to you. We oftentimes in presentations will start off with your life as an AI assisted, your marketing or business will be too. And it's this premise that what exists that we can just augment, that we can enhance what you're capable of rather than replacing you. And then that's where our marketer human to machine scale comes in, where you're just thinking about where can the AI fit in that it can actually assist us in doing something, and at what level is it assisting us, how intelligently automated it is actually making a process. So it's not about automating humans out of jobs, it's about automating an intelligent way to assist them in the jobs. And yeah, I mean, we're big fans of Eric and his writing and thinking, and I always love these bigger topics. And obviously he's taking an economics angle to it, where he's getting into tax law and things like that. But these sorts of things are really valuable. And I think, again, so many marketers and business leaders just have such a very surface level understanding of AI. But I think it's really important that we get people up to a strong competency in it, because these are the kinds of articles people need to be reading and understanding. But if you don't understand what AI really is, then this stuff just doesn't mean as much. It's not as like practical to you, but it's really critical things to be talking about.
Yeah, and I think there's an element here too related to some of the other topics we've been discussing today about as you are injecting this sense of urgency into experimenting with some of these tools, I get that it can be daunting and sometimes confusing, but it can also be really enjoyable. I mean, in the Jasper release about the funding, they actually highlight this really cool story about, hey, we used a customer of ours used Jasper's art generation function to help her 7-year-old write a children's book that they're now selling on Amazon. It's called Jimmy's Jungle Adventure. He came up with the idea, he came up with the plot. They used a combination of AI and AI generated imagery and text to build out the book. And now I clicked through the link. It's really cool. It's on Amazon, a fully fledged children's book. And I get that could be daunting, but a mom and her son turned it into a fantastic project that made him extremely happy. And I think that might be one way to approach it. It's almost that idea of being a little more playful, like have a little more child's mind about it, where it can be just a fun experiment that you do to start.
Yeah, and I think Facebook came out with like some sort of like a drawing tool for kids, similar, where you could like
Yep.
draw something, it would actually enhance it. And a lot of the way to learn this stuff is to see things like that. But yeah, I mean, back to this bigger idea here. I just think it's really important that business leaders in particular quickly develop the competency, because we need to be talking about these bigger things. And like, he ends with, we subsidize capital and we tax labor. He says, so right now we're pushing entrepreneurs, whether they want to or not, to try to figure out ways to replace human labor. If we flip that around or just level the playing field, then entrepreneurs could figure out a better way. That might be the way out of the trap he's talking about.
Mhm.
Well, that's a really broad economic conversation. That's a very important conversation. But again, until more business leaders understand the fundamentals of like that it actually could, in theory, replace labor, you can't even have this conversation. And it's just so important to be having. So, I think that's part of our goal with this podcast, is to give people a lot of really tangible examples and things you can go play with and test for yourself, but then to start seeding some of these bigger topics that hopefully more people latch onto and start talking about and thinking about themselves within their organization or their industry.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's really my final takeaway from this week, is this idea that our goal here is to help accelerate people getting into AI access. I mean, we just talked about a bunch of huge firms with some of the most talented people in the world with hundreds of millions of dollars moving the space forward. That doesn't mean you get left behind. You can actually make AI very approachable and accessible with a few simple steps. So I think just getting started with one of those tools, it couldn't be more important for any marketer out there today.
Yeah, I agree. Just do something. You got to take an action.
Yep. Yeah.
And as we were saying in the second topic, it's just so much easier to test something today. And I'll again, maybe next week we'll talk about the AI Test Kitchen, but just Google AI Test Kitchen. We'll throw the link in the show notes. But I just started playing around with it today. And again, it's a way to experience the AI. And I think the more people experience it, the more they're going to start realizing how real the tech is and how it's going to start impacting your business and your career. And so the sooner you act and start learning this stuff, the better off you're going to be. All right, man. Well, another episode done. We will be back next week with topics that'll probably emerge in the next 72 hours. Like, we don't plan these out like in advance. I mean, we're literally just kind of watching the week and trying to pick. This was a hard one to pick 3 for, honestly. Like, we had like 4 other ones we were going to address. So I don't have to. We start doing this show twice a week. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, until next week, thanks for being with us. Talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to the Marketing AI Show. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And if you're ready to continue your learning, head over to marketingaiinstitute.com. Be sure to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, check out our free monthly webinars, and explore dozens of online courses and professional certifications. Until next time, stay curious and explore AI.